Outlet Liquor is your place to buy a case. Stock up and save when you shop the lowest prices available every day at Outlet Liquor. You never have to wait for a sale. The more you buy, the more you save. Only at Outlet Liquor.
What's your outlet?
Welcome, everybody, to episode 123 of Two Goalies, One Mic. I am Duane, and I'm joined by Connor Hurley, potentially our other co-host, Johnny Cullen, if he makes it back in time from a birthday dinner for his father. We'll see. But right now, just me and Hurls. Hurls, how are you?
I'm doing well. Surprising first round of the playoffs, I think, to many. I think no one expected the best regular season team in NHL history to lose in the first round. But I think we could all rejoice a tiny bit so we don't have to deal with Boston fans for the rest of the playoffs. And yeah, the defending Stanley Cup champions also go down to an expansion team in their second year. So really, really out of the ordinary. But also when you think about what the NHL playoffs are, you can't be that surprised because this type of thing does happen. It seems like a coin flip no matter what the odds or what the matchup is. So interesting to say the least, that's for sure.
Yeah, and obviously with the way the division, the alignment of the divisions are set up, they want to create more rivalries in the playoffs and this, that, and the other. I just, I don't think anybody, Tampa, I think people would have much preferred to see, different matchups in the first round, but they definitely didn't disappoint. And now, at least out in the West, fans are finally going to get what they wanted back in 2015. They're going to get Eichel versus McDavid, much to the chagrin of us here in Buffalo. So, and
Gosh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, exactly. He's so out of sight and out of mind, but in reality, you're getting those two guys in the first round of the playoffs. First time ever,
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. I mean,
less than 4 games in a row, possibly 7.
Yeah, I think the allure of Eichel, I think that's the reason I didn't think of it, because the allure of what he was, at least to us, is so much less than it used to be. But even McDavid in that first round, he wasn't even the best player on his own team. Leon Draisaitl stole the show, I think. And I think he, in a lot of betting markets, is the consummate favorite at this point. I think he contributed to 95 or 97% of all of the goals scored in that series for the Oilers. Everyone thinks of him as second fiddle to McDavid, but he really asserted himself in that series. And if he's going, that team is almost unstoppable if they get any semblance of goaltending whatsoever. So yeah, obviously that'll be super intriguing.
Yeah. Before we do kick things off here, I do have a few things to say. Obviously here in Buffalo, the hockey community, it's a very tight-knit community. Whether you're rooting for the Sabres, local hockey, rec hockey, whatever it is, as much as it is a football city, this is as much of a hockey city at heart. Hockey, the community is very tight. And a few days ago, I woke up to a lot of posts on Facebook about a former teammate of mine and someone who was really loved by the local hockey community, Stephen Font, passed away. A guy who, again, I didn't know as well as many others did, but just from the reaction that I saw on social media, it hit the community very hard. So I just want to let everybody know and let those who loved him and cared about him most that, we're thinking about him here over at Two Goalies, One Mic. And just I reached out to a few of those that were close to him, letting him know that we were going to kind of kick things off. And I was going to say a few things about Steve. Me personally, my interactions with him, either playing hockey or just, in and around the rinks, he's always seemed like a very upbeat guy, very fun loving. a guy who always had something positive to say. But one comment that really stuck out to me the most when asked, what can you tell me about Stephen Font, and the one thing that is said, it really stuck out to me. Dude, he always looked for the pass when he had a nice shot. Kind of sums up the type of guy he was for sure, looking to set you up. That's kind of the impression I've always gotten, at least, especially over the past couple of days, of the type of guy Steve was. And I just want to let everybody know that, mental health is definitely something that isn't taken seriously enough. Not just in hockey or in sports, but just the world in general. And if you ever feel that you need help, I know there is a stigma that surrounds it, especially for men and athletes. Don't ever feel afraid that you can't talk to, reach out. If I know you, you always can reach out to me, or Charles, I'm sure you could say the same thing. Just always never feel afraid to just talk and to let people know how you're feeling. Unfortunately, there's a stigma around that, and too many people have lost their lives because of that stigma. And again, to people who knew him best, Matt Dayford, Emily Cook, Jason Flowers, all of you guys who have so many good things to say about Steven. I just want to let you guys know that I'm thinking about you all, and I hope you're getting through this tough time. You guys are my thoughts. So a couple clicks for Steve Font. You are gone but never forgotten. And one of the hashtags I've seen around is, hashtag 78 forever. So there is a GoFundMe out there for Steve and his family and his daughter. I will post that later for anybody who wants to contribute and, help them out with obviously what's to come. And, I will post that later in the thread for this episode and a couple times here throughout the week. So, again, Steve, you're in our thoughts, and, rest easy, my friend. So, obviously, another thing, Steve, I think, he loved hockey. He loved the Sabres, and, transitioning from that, I think he above all would be loving what's going on right now in the playoffs. And we'll get right into that now. Going right into, obviously, one of the matchups I think that us as Buffalo Sabres fans probably had a vested interest is the Toronto Maple Leafs. I wouldn't say upsetting the Tampa Bay Lightning, but Tampa Bay has been a juggernaut for a long time and put up a fight. But I think all the hockey they've played over the last 4 or 5 years really got the best of them. And Toronto, credit to them, they played a phenomenal series. So just your thoughts on that, Hurls?
Yeah, I mean, they finally did it. Unfortunately, the Sabres now have the longest drought of winning a playoff series for an NHL team now, which is, I think, 12 years. But yeah, it's since 2007. So
yeah, it'd be 07. We're at 12 years, I think. I think it's 12.
Well, that would be longer than 12 years. Either way, that's unfortunate. But they finally did it, and they should have. This was the year that they should have done it. Like you said, the Lightning had played a lot of hockey.
No, they made the playoff. Well, yeah, winning a playoff round, but they made the playoffs, I believe. Was it in
2009 and 2011? So yeah, I think it's a little bit longer. Yeah,
in terms of winning a playoff run, yes, it'd be 07.
It's been a little bit, but yeah, I mean, they should have won the series. They were favored. They are the better team, and they finally did get some goaltending from Samsonov. So I think that this might be the catapult they needed to finally make some noise, and they have a pretty favorable matchup. That Panthers-Bruins series was brutal. They really went at each other. It was a physical series. There were a couple overtime games, especially in Game 7 2 nights ago. So I know that game's going on as we speak, and the Panthers are actually up 1-0. But it's going to be very difficult, and I think emotionally and mentally for the Panthers to recover from beating the greatest regular season team in the history of the league. I don't think anybody expected them to actually do it. I think if you really looked into it, it's not as surprising as many people think, given the fact that they vastly underperformed in the regular season. And a season ago, they were the best team in the regular season in the NHL. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if they did put up a really good fight, maybe 6 or 7 games, but the Leafs should win. And aside from the Oilers, and I think maybe the Stars right now, they are one of the favorites to win the Cup. I think they're the favorite to come out of the East because the Hurricanes don't look like the team that they should be at this point.
No, the Hurricanes definitely do not look like the team that was so tough to play against in the regular season.
Yeah.
They do not look like a Rod Brindamore coached hockey team right now.
No, and that's the style of game they play, and if they don't have that, they've lost their identity.
So, they're a very good defensively sound hockey team. You saw it with goalies that they've had there in the past who moved on beyond away from Carolina. It's a very goalie friendly system that Rod Brindamore runs, and I think they've just gotten very away from the system there, which is just the worst possible time for that to happen.
For sure. So, I mean, in that, and they obviously get past the Panthers, but it's setting up really nicely for the Leafs. Even the Devils, like that 7-game series with the Rangers, like you knew that series was going to 7 games. And it was very physical, very tough, and that young team figured it out. I mean, I'm personally really rooting for Lindy Ruff. I think it's pretty amazing what he's done with that group. How could you not? Yeah. And
how can you not want
Kira Schmid, who I've never even heard that name before that series, and he posts 2 shutouts in 6 games. It's pretty amazing what they've been able to accomplish, especially against a Rangers team that was supposed to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. The 2 teams that sold out the most at the deadline that were preparing for this postseason specifically over the past 2 or 3 seasons, both bow out in the third round, in the first round. So, it's setting up really nicely for some of these young teams to actually make some noise.
Yeah, and one thing too I want to touch on with the Toronto series, at least, is for the first time in how many years, and we talked about this. We'll play the interview with Justin Bourne later on. Is that Vasilevsky looked human, and we talked about it in length, which we won't do now, but I think a big reason why Toronto had so much success, it wasn't for a lack of ability from Andrei Vasilevsky. I think it really was that, especially with the absence of Hedman for 1 game, I'm pretty sure he definitely playing through that injury. I think they even commented on that today and yesterday. But with the absence of Cernak, the traffic in front of Vasilevsky, I've never seen anything like that in terms of how easily Toronto was able to really obstruct his ability to see the play and see pucks, especially with the point. I want to say 8 or 9 of their 19 goals came on deflections in front, which is insanity because, us as goalies, that's the most difficult, almost no goalie can react in proper enough time for a deflection in that close. And I think, Toronto did it at will, getting pucks to the net and getting deflections, getting bodies in front of Vasilevsky, him never really having a clear line of sight to the point. I think that's really why they were able to win that series the way they did, is because it's not for a lack of talent from Tampa Bay. They're loaded. It was just, they did everything right below the dots.
Yeah. And you don't typically see that from a team like the Maple Leafs. They're usually thought of as this finesse team that plays up at the dots and doesn't get into the house as much as you'd want them to. And it's probably the reason they haven't succeeded in the first round of the playoffs in the past 17 years. Mm-hmm. They got that type of player now. They got Ryan O'Reilly, who lives in front of the net. He's unbelievable at tipping shots directly in front. And a lot of these guys that you don't normally expect that type of game from are really selling out to do so. So it's a really good coaching job. They're specifically targeting that area. And especially in this Panthers series, the goaltending is kind of up in the air. Obviously, Bobrovsky started the last 6 games of the series against the Bruins, but you never really know what you're going to get with him. He's not the most consistent guy. He can steal a game every now and then, but when it comes to consistency and solid play, you can't really trust him as much as you can.
If they allow Bob to get into a rhythm and get into, the guy we've seen in the past when he is playing at a high level, I think Toronto is going to be in trouble because I wouldn't want to deal with playoff Bob. Not a chance.
Well, he's 14 of 14 tonight, so good start.
Yeah, it's 1-0 right now, correct?
Yeah, good start.
Yep.
Halfway through the second. Yeah, if he gets on a roll and gets in the zone, like he's as talented as any goalie in the league.
100%.
It's always just been consistency and controlling rebounds and figuring it out on over the course of a long period for him. So if he's able to do that, that could be really difficult for the Maple Leafs.
Cousins with the goal for Florida, Tkachuk and Sam Bennett with the assists. The wrong Cousins, the Cousins we don't care about.
Yeah, the correctly spelled Cousins.
Cousins. Yeah, the workhorse from Whitehorse. But yeah, I that lineup in Florida is so stacked, Earl. So stacked.
Yeah.
Tkachuk's on the second line. You have a 100 plus point player on your second line.
It's crazy.
The top line, I think, is who's centering? They're centering Verhaeghe. Yeah, Barkov centering Verhaeghe, and I want to say maybe Duclair.
Yeah, that sounds.
And then Reinhardt is on the third line. Sam Reinhardt. That's a guy who again we just spoke on that, getting in front of the goaltender. That's where Sam Reinhardt is at his best, sitting in top of the blue paint and making life a living hell for goaltenders, sticking on pucks, getting in shooting lanes. He's made his career on doing that.
And look at Brandon Montour, 5 goals in the first round.
He started.
Former Sabre Brandon Montour, who we never should have gotten rid of. Everyone keeps saying how perfect of a partner he would be with Owen Power. It would be incredible.
If we had Brandon Montour all season last year, we would be in the playoffs.
Yeah, for sure. He's that type of player that, I mean, he's capable of scoring 5 goals as a defenseman. He's so skilled, and he's probably one of the best skating defensemen in the league. So it's tough to see that. But they did recruit some assets for him, and with Sam Reinhart, obviously Devin Levi came back. So it's not all doom and gloom in terms of watching the Panthers right now. So it is pretty amazing to think about the fact that they barely snuck into the playoffs with all of this talent. But they had some injuries. They had some shakeups to do. Obviously, that massive trades, which seems to have worked out really well for them and not for the Flames, sending Huberdeau and getting back Tkachuk. What a steal that is.
You saw Daryl Sutter get canned. Was it yesterday?
Yeah. Flames are going up in flames once again.
And Huberdeau was pretty outspoken about it. He said that he wasn't the player he's always been because, and we know this story here in Buffalo with Ralph Kruger. The system he was playing doesn't benefit his skill set, and whoever they bring in there, there is a lot of talent still in Calgary. If they can figure that out, that is a talented hockey team. So we'll see what happens, but. And another thing too, when you go out west, you see Seattle upset the defending Stanley Cup champions. I know they didn't have Landeskog. I think Kadri was out too, right?
Kadri's on the Flames, but yeah.
They don't have Kadri anymore, is what I'm saying. Like they did last year. I believe Cale Makar has been playing hurt.
He was suspended for 1 game. I know that, and I mean, basically half that team was hurt the entire year. Yeah. I think they really were feeling the effects of that cup run last year. Sometimes that happens, especially with a team like Colorado, like this finesse team with all these skill guys and not a lot of jam. So
Matthew Nyes just scored for Toronto, first career NHL playoff goal.
Wow!
So we got a tie game at 1-1. Florida and the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I think that's going to be a really interesting series. 100%.
For sure.
We'll see if Samsonov can pick up where he left off in the first round against Tampa. And hopefully we get playoff Bob. And actually, no, I don't want either goalie to be good. I just want this to be a series where you pick the over every single game.
Yeah, that was popular tonight, but 1-1 in the second isn't necessarily what you'd expect from that, but it'll probably open up. These teams aren't necessarily the most defensively minded squads. Nope. So,
yep. And again, I look out west, again, I Seattle Kraken beating the Avalanche. Are they the next Vegas Golden Knights who, went to the finals in their inaugural year? No, I don't think so. I don't think they're as talented, but they're definitely a team that's going to be dealt with, especially how far they are underneath the salary cap. Grubauer has played well. I think it's kind of like a poetic that he was the goalie that knocked Colorado out of the first round. A lot of fun there. And And then we get and again, you mentioned it beforehand that you didn't even think of it. We're getting the Vegas, the Eichel versus McDavid matchup for at least 4 games in the first round here out west. So that'll be interesting to watch too. We all know who us in Buffalo here are going to be rooting against. That's for sure. Down goes Vegas, hopefully. But just your thoughts on those matchups out west?
I think Seattle is not your typical expansion team. I think Vegas back in, I think it was 2018, 2019, they had a lot of talent come over. They had a lot of guys who could put the puck in the net. Obviously, Alex Tuck was on the team. They had Marchessault. They had Carlson. They had a lot of really skilled guys, whereas Vegas is like this team all year. They didn't have a guy produce at a point per game. Seattle all year. They didn't have a guy produce at a point per game rate the entire season. They just have a lot of role players like Jaden Schwartz, Jordan Eberle, all these guys. I mean, Matthew Beniers has been amazing as a rookie. They have these guys that play a very physical and responsible game, and their defense has been really, really good. Obviously, Grubauer had a down first year, but it seems like he's responded really well. And like you said, going up against his former team always helps. But yeah, I do think that they're the type of team that could potentially make some noise. The only difficulty for them is that I think the Stars are actually really, really good. They are a veteran team, yes, and they play a similar type of game to Seattle, but they also have superstars. Jason Robertson is probably the most underrated player in hockey. He shouldn't be for those that actually really know the game, but his name isn't up there with the Kachucks and the McDavids and the Pasternaks and the Dreisaitl's, just because he's still relatively young and this is his second year of doing it. And obviously you still have Jamie Benn and Joe Pavelski and all these guys that have produced for the past 10 years. So yeah, I think the Stars could be a sneaky team to get to the Cup final. And they also have probably the best goalie left in the playoffs in Jake Ottinger.
I love watching Ottinger play.
Yeah, he's amazing. He's incredible. He's got the size. He's got the positioning. He's got the reaction skills. He's got everything you want in a goalie. And he's young, and he can do these every other night games with ease. So that's something to think about, especially if it ends up being Dallas and Edmonton. Can Jake Ottinger steal you another series? He almost did it last playoffs. I think he had a game where he had upwards of 60 saves in a double overtime game. So, yeah, we'll see what happens there. But if I had to give the slight advantage to any team in the West, it aside from Edmonton, it's probably Dallas, just because of the depth they have up and down the lineup and the goaltending.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And again, they're a very physical team too. They always kind of have been. I wouldn't say they're built for the playoffs in terms of physicality, but they're not afraid to get dirty, to get hairy. And definitely, I'll never root for the Dallas Stars ever.
No, but absolute nightmare Cup final would be Dallas versus Toronto.
No, my God,
that would be horrible.
Or Vegas versus Toronto.
Yeah, either one would be really brutal. I
don't think I'd watch. I don't think I'd watch.
I would watch.
I don't know if I could watch.
I would watch with a snarl on my face. But yeah, it's we'll see what happens. I personally don't think Toronto's going to do it. I just can't picture it happening. Yeah, hopefully the Panthers will make it easy on us.
Yeah, and again, it's cool too that you're not going to get a team that's going to win the Cup this year. That it's been a while for all the teams remaining. It's been a long time since they've won a Cup. You're so used to seeing Tampa in the mix. You're so used to seeing Pittsburgh in the mix or Boston in the mix. They're all either they didn't make it or they're just out of it entirely. So, yeah. It will be a fun, again, I'm not a guy who, it's hard for me. I won't say it's hard for me to get invested into the playoffs because I love hockey. But I think that with this year, how good the Sabres were, or, how surprising they were to an extent, I was so invested in them making the playoffs. It makes it a little bit more tougher for me to, I guess, be as invested as I have in the past of the playoffs because I'm just still like, fuck, man, it should have been us. We shouldn't be there. But I think if I'm, we kick the show off. If I'm going to hitch my wagon to anybody, it's definitely the New Jersey Devils. Just because if there's any former Sabre that's out there right now that I want to see win a Cup, 1,000% it's Lindy Ruff, because I think right now he's the winningest, most winningest active coach out there. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying he's a Hall of Fame coach, but I think he puts himself in a different level of coaches if he finally does win a Cup. And
sure. I mean, if he wins a cup, I think he puts himself in that conversation.
He's definitely in the conversation as a Hall of Famer for sure.
Yeah, and I think he might already be. I mean, with his longevity and the teams that he's taken to obviously all those Sabres teams, but I don't know. I really do think that he's a very underrated coach and has been for a long time.
The thing that I'm most impressed with, because obviously you go back to when he started his career with Buffalo behind a bench in 97, 98, his first year behind the Sabres bench, how hockey has changed between just a style of play, the rules, and obviously just the culture of player that you're dealing with, the personalities. You know, a lot of people tend to think that sometimes you have to be more of a player-friendly coach nowadays. You can't be a guy who goes in the locker room, calls out players, and throws stuff at the walls and tips a table over. You can't do that sometimes, I guess, with today's players. And I don't know how true that is at that level. I consider myself different in terms of a player. I guess, again, me being 35, you being at age you are, I don't know how you would react or how you would take that type of coaching, but Lindy's kind of had to navigate through all these different areas of hockey and adjust his coaching style and still be successful. Because this time last year, people wanted him out of New Jersey. They were chanting at games, fire Lindy. I think there was "We're sorry, Lindy" chant in New Jersey this year. Even sorry, like the fans apologized to him chant in the form of chant at a home game this year when I think they were on that heater. What was it? They were on a winning streak or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like 12 or 13 games.
Yeah, it was nuts. Crazy. Jack Hughes was absolutely on fire. But I'm impressed how well he's been able to navigate through these different eras of hockey and still be successful.
Yeah, obviously, I mean, he's got one of the younger teams in the league now. Like you have your superstar is 21 years old. You've got all these guys, like obviously Nico Hischier, we don't even think of him as like a recent #1 overall pick, but like he's not that long ago either. I read a quote from Lindy today just talking about coaching in generality, and he says, like, put down your notebook, like get to know your players, talk to them, like figure out like who they are as people before diving deep into the analytics or the X's and O's of the game. And it, like you said, like it does seem like he's changed his personality quite a bit. He's a lot calmer than he used to be. That's for sure. He's not leaning over the bench to yell at Brian Murray, which was valid. And I'm glad that he did that. And I'm sure he still would if he really needed to, but in his older years. And I think like you said, like he's dealing with Gen Z kids. Like he's dealing with kids that like grew up with like Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin as their favorite players. Like he's been around coaching in this league way before they were even born. And for him to adapt to today's game and to today's sensibility of these younger guys, it's really incredible. And I'm really happy for him. I'm glad it's worked out.
Yeah. And, I wanted to say what generation one. I couldn't think of it. I'm glad you said it. Cause I don't even know what generation I'm considered, man. I don't even care.
You're probably a millennial if you're 35.
I was 87 birth year. So.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely a millennial.
A millennial? Okay, well, every different generation gets blamed for the way things are. I don't know. Like all I know is, when I was a younger kid, first going into hockey, we were climbing trees and playing cat's cradle the past time. And nowadays, you can't walk by a kid that doesn't have his head buried in a cell phone. So watching hockey highlights on YouTube.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's cool though. I really hope it seems like they have a pretty good matchup. Like we said with the Hurricanes, like losing Max Pacioretty, I think was a bigger loss than people think. Yes. And their goaltending and their defense isn't quite what we hold that standard to. And they're not getting much production from their top lines and Sebastian Aho and Martin Necas and all these guys that we've come to expect points from. So yeah, I think they have a pretty good situation themselves. A Leafs Devils Eastern Conference Finals would be absolutely electric. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see how they do.
Did the first round matchup of the Rangers Devils live up to every expectation?
I think so. I mean, given the fact that it started 2-0, like 4 straight road wins, a couple shutouts here and there. I mean, Game 7 wasn't great, but at the same time, like for the home team to finally do it and get a shutout at home in front of their home fans, like the geographic rivalry there was so cool, obviously, because like you have these Devils fans that haven't had success in a long time, and the Rangers have been so good recently, but haven't been able to get over the hump. I thought so. I was pretty entertained by it. I mean, obviously it was kind of a low scoring series, but just with the drama of it all, I thought it was pretty entertaining.
Yeah. And do you think Gerard Gallant is out in the next couple of days? I've seen that thrown around a lot. You kind of went all in at the deadline. You went out, you got Vlad Tarasenko. You went out, you got Patrick Kane. You made the moves to try and put yourself in a position to be a cup contender, and you lose in 7 in the first round to, division rival, the New Jersey Devils, who are honestly equally as dangerous offensively. They just are.
Yeah.
And you have this goaltender Schmidt that comes out of nowhere and plays like a brick wall. And like you said, 2 shutouts. I don't know if Gallant's job is safe. He could be on the chopping block here in a day or two.
I think he got a raw deal in Vegas, to be honest.
100%.
And I do think he's a good coach. I wouldn't put it necessarily all on him. I just think they were kind of slow. They're a little bit older. Obviously, everyone's older compared to the Devils. But I don't know. They didn't seem like they had the chemistry that they needed. Obviously, they brought in a lot of guys at the deadline, Tarasenko and Kane, who are both older. And they were hoping that would push them over the edge. And they didn't have bad series, but at the same time, like, wasn't necessarily all that they needed. I mean, you can't blame it on Shesterkin, that's for sure.
No,
you have arguably the best goalie in the league, and that's partially why I picked them to win this series. But yeah, no, I think it's definitely inspiring a little bit more of a youth movement there. Obviously, their youth line with Hedl and Lafreniere. And I forget the other guy, Capo Caco, obviously. They need to produce a little bit more.
0 points.
Yeah, it's just like, that's not what you expect from a number 1 overall pick.
I think, personally, I think that he might be gone.
Yeah, I mean, gosh,
Remember when he was untouchable in the Jack Eichel debacle?
Yeah, I mean, so was Kako, and so were a lot of these guys. Like, it's just, what are we doing here? So yeah, you need more production out of them, and just in general, I think they need to just revamp that entire roster. The defense is obviously very good. Like, you have 2 of the better defenders in the game, and Miller and Adam Fox, and Trouba's a great captain. So they're not far off. And as long as they have Shesterkin, who's in his prime, and he will be for the next like 3 to 4 years, I think they'll always have a chance. But they need to do a couple things to figure it out.
You kind of look back at all that too, and just all the smoke around the players that Buffalo was trying to get out of the Rangers when like the Eichel to the Rangers thing, it almost seemed like it was happening, and all the this guy's untouchable. Like, you kind of look back at that, and then you look at the deal we got from Vegas. It was like, holy shit, man! Could you imagine if we end up making that deal with the Rangers? How pissed off we'd all be right now.
Yeah, for sure. Almost like any other deal that was, aside from the Matthew Tkachuk one that was like briefly thrown out there. I don't know if that was ever real.
Thanks, Kevin Weeks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that would be the only one that potentially could have been better than what we got. But no, thankfully we can sleep peacefully knowing that Alex Tuch is as good or better than Jack Eichel, and that's all you really need to know.
Yeah, and the one thing about Alex Tuch that we always used to see before he came to Buffalo was obviously when he was at Minnesota, that shootout movie played in practice. It was like a running highlight for years because it was filthy. But and then his celebration walking by the bench afterwards. Now there's more about his career that he's lived up to, and he's lived up to the hype that he was drafted with. So again, I couldn't be happier with the leader that we got in that deal.
And, we're going to see him in the World Championships coming up in a few weeks.
He's going to be playing with his brother.
Yeah, that'll be really cool. It's the first time he's played for the U.S. team in a long time. So yeah, I mean, I typically never watch because there's really not much reason to. And hopefully we'll get a few other guys that play for.
I know Casey has declined to go because he wants to stay healthy, which I appreciate that, because that's one thing.
Smart.
With. Yeah. So, and obviously I assume players have been dealing, after 82 game season, you're dealing with a lot. I think you'd be lying. Every single player in that team would be lying, maybe except for Devin Levi, who would come out of last season and say that they weren't dealing with some type of ailment. It's a long hockey season, and
for sure
everybody deals with bumps and bruises along the way. But and we got some Sabres news today too. The Sabres signed a Russian entry-level deal. I'm trying to pull up his name and his exact
Victor Noichev.
Noichev, yes, out of the KHL. 12 points this past season in the KHL, but he's 19 years old and he's playing in a league with men. You kind of look at those numbers. I know he's a third-round pick. You're like, well, this kid's nothing. Trust me, he's over there playing with full-grown adults as a 19-year-old. You can't ever expect the numbers to really jump out at you, maybe like the way Yuri Kulik has out here in the AHL as an 18-year-old. But, he's playing with very well-seasoned professionals over there. A lot of former NHLers that play over in the KHL. So, again, maybe you don't feel like it's overly impressive, but as a 19-year-old, I mean, there's still a lot to build there. So,
for sure. And like even getting Russians signed in this day and age, in this geopolitical climate, is a very tall task. So for them to do that as quickly as they have, obviously we just drafted him this past season, is a very positive step in the right direction. Along with a defenseman, I think Novikov, he just refused a deal in the KHL within the past week, so he potentially could be coming soon. I had a friend describe him to me as the Russian Samuelson. So I imagine he's a bigger stay-at-home guy, right-handed shot D, I think. And I mean, obviously having someone like that either in Rochester and in a couple of years, hopefully eventually up in Buffalo would be great. So I mean, and then there's Poltapov as well, the other Russian prospect.
There's Komarov, who's playing with the Quebec Ramparts right now. I think in terms of highly touted defensive prospects after Ryan Johnson, he's up there. Big kid, big defenseman. Yep. Kiskakov, is he a defense? They went pretty Russian heavy the last couple of drafts.
Yeah, Kiskakov, I don't think he is. I could be wrong.
He's not a defenseman. Yeah. But speaking of Ryan Johnson, still not signed yet. I feel like every day that goes by, I feel more and more, less and less confident that they're going to get that done because, I mean, how much more thinking do you need to do? You've had all season to think about it. I just think he's gone at this point.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily blame him. We talked about it when we had Ryan and Walt on. He sees what the Sabres already have on defense with Dahlin and Power and Samuelson as you're locked in top three for the next 10 plus years. Mm-hmm. He's probably looking at his potential with this team and being like, hey, I'm definitely not going to be one of the top two defensemen. I might be the third, but there's Samuelson as well. And what type of role am I going to have on this team? So that's difficult. And it sucks in the sense that, of course you want to sign your first round prospects, but at the same time, it also lets you know where the Sabres are as a franchise in terms of what the future is and in terms of how much potential they have on the back end. So I don't think it's the end of the world. And obviously they would recoup a draft pick if he doesn't sign. And then that also leaves another opening to go out and get a free agent this offseason. So I think you can look at it in a bittersweet type way, but you could also just be like, hey, you understand you can't get them all, and then you just go and figure it out.
If you're Kevin Adams, or you're not Kevin Adams, are you trying to sign that guy to maybe, in free agency, or do you look at this draft as an opportunity to, you're probably drafting between 10. I'm not sure if it's been declared when the Sabres will be drafting. But it's probably going to be between 10 and 15. Is that a situation where instead of maybe spending or throwing a bunch of money at a free agent, maybe you use that first round pick for an established top pair defenseman?
Yeah, but at the same time, that top pair defenseman that's going to be drafted. We're probably going to put the 15th or 16th pick. Yeah. Those guys don't play for 2 to 3 years. So it's hard to say.
You want somebody to come in now. It's going to help.
Exactly. Yeah. I think they absolutely have to sign a defenseman this offseason.
Yeah.
To get the defense to the point where we're all a lot more confident.
Well, no, I wasn't saying draft a guy there. I'm saying trade that pick for a guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying.
Instead of throwing a bunch of money at a free agent, because, you always tend to overpay people in free agents. Sure. Maybe you find a guy on a relatively manageable contract, whoever that might be, and hey, here's 13 overall.
I mean, I've mentioned Rasmus Anderson a few times, but I think
we talk about him Rackle Gudas.
Yeah, I think
lot
that
of
could be
players.
exactly the type of situation that you do, because like you said, like we're in a spot now that the playoffs are the expectation next season.
Yes.
And it would be a pretty massive failure if they're not in it. So I think you at least have to consider it. First, second round picks, because anything beyond a second round pick doesn't really have much of a chance to make it to the NHL. It's very, very low percentages. So yeah, like I think he's definitely, Kevin Adams definitely has to be considering that, given all of the capital they already have and the prospect pool that already exists from these 7-8+ years of just drafting. Like they're finally in a position to succeed, so they have to take advantage of it.
I don't know, what's happened. It was 10 minutes ago we updated the score. It's now 3-2 Panthers.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he just scored on
Panthers. The floodgates are opened.
Yes, we talked about, hit the over. If the NHL Watcher account is correct, he just tweeted out, because I subscribed to him, that Verhaeghe just scored to put Florida up 3-2. So goals for Florida from Sam Bennett, Cousins, and Verhaeghe. And then Toronto from Bunting and Matthew Nyes, who was assisted, an Arizona kid scoring his first career NHL playoff goal, assisted by another Arizona kid from Austin Matthews. I don't know if that's ever happened before in the NHL, but, ties to the Arizona hockey market, so to speak.
Yeah.
So
it's a hotbed these days.
Yeah, right. So, again, what matchup are you obviously most interested in? Before we kick it over to Justin, interview we did this morning with Justin Bourne, like what's caught your eye the most? What matchup are you most interested in watching? And, outside of New Jersey, who are you rooting for out of the West?
I think it's got to be Edmonton and Vegas. I mean, now that you've reminded me of McDavid versus Eichel, but even in the sense that it's McDavid and Draisaitl, and a team in Vegas that obviously has gotten really close so many times and they haven't gotten over the hump, but it seems like they're finally hitting their stride at the right moment right now. And I honestly think for the good of the league and also the entertainment and the visibility of it, I would love to see Connor McDavid in a Stanley Cup final. I think he, above all people, deserves it. And the team around him is finally playing to a level that could support him to do it. I really believe that it would be the best possible thing for the visibility of hockey, especially going up against the NBA playoffs right now, all of the NHL free agency news, everything else for the superstar of the league, the best player in all 4 major professional sports, to be at the pinnacle of the sport. Not necessarily win it, just get there and have the most eyeballs on him as possible. So
how much does hockey just in general wish that matchup was happening in the Eastern Conference and not as far out west as you can get, where games aren't getting starting until like late at night when people just want to go to bed.
For sure. Thankfully not for me. Game
you,
started
yes,
at 6:37. So I will be watching. And I think a lot of people, that's the thing, like he's must-see television. And as with Draisaitl is right now. So yeah, I would love to see that. And like I said, I think the Stars potentially could be a really, really tough test for them. And who knows what will happen with the Kraken. But yeah, I would love to see Edmonton. And I think that series with the Golden Knights is going to be really entertaining.
I want to see friggin' Connor McDavid just shit all over the Vegas Golden Knights. Absolute sweep. McDavid has friggin' 10 points in 4 games. And, Voldemort doesn't have a single point in the first 4 games. That'd be fantastic. In a perfect world, that's what I would expect.
He who must not be named.
He who must not be named.
We don't have to mention his name ever again on this podcast.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we will, but
yeah,
never in a good, positive way. So, with that said, we're going to kick it over to my interview earlier today with Justin Bourne from Sportsnet. Had a lot of fun with him. Great guy, returning guest. And, had a lot of great insight, especially on the Toronto series, a guy who comes from that area up in Ontario. We'll kick it over to him. Guys, thanks for hopping on with us. Hurls, it's always a pleasure. We're going to kick it over to Justin Bourne now. So, Welcome, everybody, to episode 123 of Two Goalies, One Mic. I am Duane Steinel, joined by the author of Down and Back on Hockey, Alcoholism, and Family, analyst for Sportsnet, former coach, Justin Bourne. Thanks, bud, for coming on again. It's been a long time, but glad to see you're doing well, and thanks for making the time.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thanks for having me.
Before we really get into it, can you, I'll pump your book here a little bit. Anything you really want to say on that? Anything you really want to promote with that, or where can people if they want to read it?
Yeah, it's anywhere good books are sold, I think is what I'm supposed to say. But it's I would say, depending on your interest, the first half of that book is a hockey book. It's a lot of my story and my journey through the ranks and my experiences with all the things that come with pro hockey culture. And then the back half of the book is sort of the aftermath a little bit. And it got away from me for a little while. So it's a story about trying to get life back on track and the struggles that a lot of people deal with in their families, whether themselves or people close to them, Yeah.
And, just kind of like reading the cliff notes here a little bit on the book. Obviously, alcoholism plays a big part in that. We've had on Clint Malarchuk on this show a couple times. And obviously, I'm sure you know his story. Have you read his book?
I haven't read his book, but I'm familiar with the story.
It in part has to do with his article in the Players Tribune a few years ago. Very good advocate, for mental health awareness and obviously a better, healthier you. So I'm definitely going to order that for sure.
Thanks,
give that a look for sure. Because that stuff always interests me, because I think we all have demons that we deal with. And I think people who, like, especially myself, I've been pretty open about this, is that we're very good at putting masks on. We're the best actors. So people don't really realize when you are dealing with something, because you're always you always have that mask on. You're being a good actor. And that's one of the things that Clint Malarchuk really compared the way he handled himself back then, and how many people didn't really know that he was struggling. We become good actors. And I just do want to take a moment here too to send my thoughts and my thoughts out to the family of Stephen Font. Now that we've kind of touched on that, a hockey player here locally who did lose his life recently due to his battle with mental health, and just my thoughts go out to him and his friends and family. A big part of the hockey community here in Buffalo. So, couple clicks for him, and hopefully that, the people that loved him most are doing well and, getting through this tough time. So,
for sure.
With that being said, I do want to get right into, after 18 years, the Toronto Maple Leafs finally get over that first round hump. Much to the chagrin of outside market fans like myself here in Buffalo, I always rooted for the Leafs to just blow it up, and just to,
of course, just
be a dumpster fire pretty much.
Yeah.
And, the night David Ayers happened, that was one of the funnest nights ever in terms of hating the Leafs. And, but I, as a Sabres fan who's dealt with now 12 years of no playoffs, a Bills fan who's dealt with 17-year playoff drought, I'm happy for Leafs fans. I really, really am. I'm very empathetic to that struggle. I'm very empathetic to the misery of having your season end so early, either, in the first round or not at all in the playoffs. So I'm happy for a lot of the diehards out there, especially. I just wanted to kind of touch on how they were able to get over that hump, how they were able to get past that, as you quoted in your latest article on Sportsnet, the Vasi factor. How did they get that done? And, how do they match up going forward with the Florida Panthers?
Yeah, I think a lot of the things that hadn't gone right for them in playoffs in the past worked in their favor a little bit. They had never had a series where their goaltender had the higher save percentage at the end of it. This is the first time in the past 7 years. And oh, wow. They find, Vasilevsky struggled a little bit, and that, they end up with the better goaltending in the critical game and they get the win. That's a huge part of it. To their credit, one thing they did in this series that they maybe didn't do as well in past years was just getting to that area that makes goalies' lives hard. They tipped in I don't know how many pucks, but I know through 4 games they had 8 goals on screenshots. The last couple games, not that different. The one that goes in ends up going off a leg in front because Radish is trying to clear the net front because there's a guy there. They got to the net. Vasilevsky couldn't deal with it very well. Their power play was at 28%, where in previous playoffs it was 13, 14. Just a few critical things changed a little bit. They weren't that far off in past years, so getting small improvements was enough to get them over the hump. In terms of Florida, that's a very different matchup in that, the pressure's a little bit off the Leafs now, but Florida's humming, man. I don't know if you followed that last stretch for them. Last 25 games of the year, they were one of the better teams in the league. There are shades of St. Louis to them where, you get hot at the right time with a team that has talent and anything can happen. And, Tkachuk and Barkov and Bennett and Reinhart and Verhaeghe and Ekblad and Montour, they got guys. If they can get Bobrovsky to stop some pucks, they're going to be a tough out.
And Bob was playing pretty well there when they called upon him in the second half of that first round. And obviously to see the Bruins blow a 3-1 lead,
also fun.
If Toronto's not going to do it, that's your next best option is the Boston Bruins. Stepping back to your previous comments about Vasilevsky again, I read the article, very well done. If you're wondering what article we're talking about, if you go to Justin's Twitter page at JT Bourne, it's his pinned tweet. You talk about a lot of the traffic set up in front. That Vasilevsky, and obviously I'm a goaltender. My co-host is a goaltender. It was never really an issue while watching that round of Vasilevsky, as you stated, not being square to pucks, not being out and being aggressive. It was really, like you pointed out, just Toronto being, bothersome. Actually, that's probably for lack of a better term, in front, outside the blue paint, really getting in his face, really getting in his grill. And I think, obviously not having Hedman, they didn't have Hedman for 1 or 2 games.
Just one, but, he certainly, I think they just reported he had a hip impingement or something. He's been struggling a little bit. And
then Saranac, no matter what you want to say about the player, people yell karma, he's thrown those hits all his entire career. Not having him, that's 2 of your top 4 defensemen not in your lineup. I think they're both, I want to say they both played on, they're both paired together, were they not?
They were so thin after McDonough moved on that Chernak was kind of trying to anchor his own pair at one point, but he was such a key part for them because they were so thin. So losing him was a huge swing in the series,
especially in front of the net. To your point again in that article is he was one of those guys that wasn't afraid to clean up the bodies in front, was to create those lanes for Vasilevsky to see pucks coming from the blue line. Granted, unfortunately, he went down. Bunting was suspended for 3 games. I thought Matthew Knies came in and played very well in his absence. But, you have to take advantage of those things when they happen. And, Toronto did. And they created a lot of traffic in front of Vasilevsky to the point where he wasn't seeing these pucks at all. And I remember, I want to say it was a Mitch Marner shot for a deflection by Matthews, maybe.
Yeah.
In the season, if you might remember that one. Game 1. Perfect example of how they were just creating really hell for Vasilevsky in front.
For sure.
Blue paint.
Yeah.
But it did make him look human. And I think that, I've always said going into a round, as long as you have Vasilevsky in that, you have a chance. Well, they did the one thing they had to do to really give themselves a chance in that series. And they made him look human. But
they just relied too heavily on him, right? They knew they had Vasilevsky, and they said, almost like they devalued their defense core at that point. You go to the deadline, you spend 5 picks to get Tanner Jeannot. Meanwhile, your D core is 1 injury away from being critically thin, and it ended up costing them.
Yep, exactly. And then again, moving on to the next round, obviously we kind of touched on it, Toronto and Florida. How well does Toronto match up against Florida? I know we talked about Bob having to make some saves, but there's some players on that team, especially Matthew Tkachuk, that are kind of born for playoff hockey with their style of play. I think, I've always said the first round is the most brutalizing round of hockey. You know what I mean? That's where you get the most physical play. It's more loose. You're probably going to see a fight or 2 here and there. Where things starting to tighten up beyond that round. But Matthew Tkachuk is a guy who just was really born for playoff hockey. And how well does does Toronto match up against a guy like him and, that blue line of his with anchored by Ekblad?
When you're at this point of the season, every team you play is going to have elite guys, whether it's Braden Point and Kucherov and Stamkos, or it's, Tkachuk and Barkov, or, every team at this point has those elite guys. And so, you kind of hope that your elite guys are better than theirs, or at least neutralize them. In this series, I think Florida has a speed advantage. They're fast. They forecheck really aggressively. But outside of that, I think one thing that gives Toronto an advantage is Tampa was super disciplined. Like, they stay above the puck. They clog up the neutral zone. They make you come through guys. It's not a lot of fun to play offense. Like, Florida's humming. And so that opens things up a little bit for Toronto to go the other way. And so Florida creates offense at an elite rate. Like, they're one of the best teams in the NHL at creating offense, but they also give it up the other way. And when your decor, you got Mark Stahl and Josh Mahura, and they got some names that are not, Gudas, not elite guys, and your goaltending is what it is, you're going to give up some chances. So I think you'll see a higher scoring series, one that maybe Toronto is a little bit more comfortable in. And this may be the rare series, if you look back at Toronto's history, where they're the more structurally disciplined team. I actually, I do like Toronto's odds in this series, as much as, I've got the bias of doing a Leaf show every day. I can see a way that they match up pretty well here.
I don't know what the hell that was. I'm sorry. The phone just started to ring. No, I 100% agree with you. I'm a big fan of Radko Gudas. He's a guy like a piece, we go back here in Buffalo that, one of a guy, at least his style of play, I think Buffalo could really use in their blue line. In terms of offensively, I think their depth is incredible. I'm not sure, where they fit in, but, you have Sam Bennett on your second line. Where was Verhaeghe was playing on the top line with Barkov and Duclair? When
they load up with Tkachuk and Barkov and Verhaeghe, they got a elite top few guys. Verhaeghe scored 42 this year, I think, and scored the OT winner. They got guys, so it's the Toronto decor has its work cut out for them. The best thing for them is that they used 8D in the last series pretty comfortably. So I think they have the opportunity to see what works, and if they don't, flip a couple of guys out and for others.
Yeah, and I the reason I was kind of taking a step back, I just didn't even realize Tkachuk isn't even listed on the top line, and they got 100 points this season. It's just, it's wild to me. And you have Anton Lundell centering that third line with former Sabres Stan Reinhart, and I'm sorry if I always butcher his name, Luskarianen.
Sounds right.
Yep, it's close enough. And then fourth line is, I don't know if he's a future Hall of Famer or not, but Eric Stahl centering with Dalpe and White. The depth on that team is just absolutely incredible. And again, I think that'll create, honestly, more problems for Toronto than Tampa, at least offensively. I think game.
A lot of Tampa, what they had going for them was they're Tampa Bay, and they have the mythology of having won, and John Cooper's an elite coach. They really being Tampa Bay is part of it. If you looked at their rosters and swapped the jerseys, you can convince me that this Florida team is better than Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, thin decor. The goaltending, was a question mark in this series anyway. They just were kind of petered out from a lot of playoff runs, I think.
I would personally never take Bob over Vasilevsky just because it's Vasilevsky. Right. But to your other points, 100%. I think Florida is a better team on paper than Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has essentially played close to 4 seasons of hockey in 3 years.
So true. They played an extra season worth, haven't they?
Eventually, I know people kind of say that Tampa needs to blow that team up now. No, they don't. They really don't. Their oldest player, their core, it'll be 33 next year. Vasilevsky's still 29 years old. You still have a lot of these guys who are still going to put up 90+ points for you next year. Yeah, it sucks that you have almost no draft capital in this next draft, and you're going to have to make some moves to get yourself under the salary cap. But I don't think you really have to do a ton to that line. You don't have to blow anything up at all.
No, if they add another D-man or something, and actually Radish played pretty well for them. Like I'm not worried. I'd be more worried about Tampa next year when they have someone to reload.
I thought Perbix came in and played very well for them too. So.
For sure. Yeah, and they had Hayden Fleury as their 7th. They're all right. Tampa's going to be good.
I think they're going to be all right. 100%.
Maybe not as good as Buffalo next year, but they're going to be.
Well, we're going to get into that shortly at the end, not in a few minutes. But will Samsonov hold up against Toronto? That's another question, because I think that was Toronto's biggest question mark heading into the playoffs is, will their goaltending be good enough? You kind of looked to Matt Murray to be the answer to start the season. He wasn't able to stay healthy, and now you kind of took a flyer out on Samsonov, low risk, high reward, I guess you could say. Had a lot of hype coming out of the KHL when he was drafted by Washington.
Yeah.
And he never really lived up to it early on. And will he continue where he left off against Tampa? He had moments where he looked really good and moments where he didn't. Will he be able to handle himself as well as he did against Tampa, are they north or south of Tampa?
No idea. I think they're south. They're south. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
You're going to say south. Then they're brothers from the north, I guess we'll say.
Yeah. The Samsonov question is, I think when he's played poorly, he's had reason to be nervous. He played his worst game in Toronto when he went back to play Washington the first time. He said he was nervous. In the first game or two, the first game in particular, the playoffs, he was just, over pushing aggressively. I was sliding everywhere, and it wasn't pretty to watch. And it's because he's too engaged, wants it too much. I do think that winning a round in a way where he was a key piece to getting the victory for them should give him the confidence that he can do this.
Agreed.
He's a good goalie, and so you hope that he settles in now. They always worry about him with injuries here or there, but he's never really had the chance to be the guy like he is here in Toronto right now. So big opportunity for him, and impressed with how he held up after a shaky start in Game 1 last round.
Yeah, I'm actually very interested to see how he plays. Again, I'm not rooting for Toronto by any means at all.
Yeah.
As a Sabres fan, I still live in the days of the late 90s, early 2000s rivalry when it was alive and well. Back in the days of Hasek, and then, that Baron to Miller in terms of what we had in that. It was always fun, those games where Toronto, the fans would be in our arena, and it would be a lot more even in terms of attendance. I'll tell you that much. It wouldn't look like a Toronto home game back then. Hopefully not anymore. But yeah, I like Samsonov. I'm always like a good underdog story, and I guess that's what you could say he is, in terms of, again, they took a flyer out on him hoping that he could reestablish himself as a great goaltender, or at least a good goaltending prospect.
Right.
I consider him that.
Yeah.
I don't know what Florida would have to do to get in his head. But they do have players on that team like Matthew Tkachuk and Sam Reinhart, who has really made his living and made his money in front of the net,
They score, man. Samsonov's got his hands full, no doubt about it.
Yeah, 100%. So that'll be interesting, because I think that could be honestly an X factor for Toronto. Can their goaltending hold up? Because I don't think you're going to stop Matthews. You're not going to stop Marner. You're not going to stop Nylander. Those guys are going to do their job. They showed up when you needed them. Tavares too, against Tampa.
Bet the over.
Yep. Bet the over. You wouldn't be wrong. I really don't think you're wrong. I'm not a betting man, but if you're hitting the over in Florida-Toronto series, I think you'd be making the right choice.
Yeah.
Other second round matchups. Obviously, we've seen the Bruins 2 nights ago blow a 3-1 series lead against Toronto's matchup of the Florida Panthers, and then but the Rangers obviously last night blew a 2-0 early lead to the New Jersey Devils. What about that series interests you the most? And we actually have a pretty vested interest here in Buffalo. Lindy Ruff is behind the Devils bench. We're really rooting for New Jersey just because of that. We'd like to see them get a cup. But what interests you the most about that season? And I think there's a lot of criticism to be handed out at the Rangers, especially for guys like Artemi Panarin.
Yeah, Panarin, I think he had 1 5-on-5 point in the whole series, and it was a secondary assist. They went all in at the deadline, right? They go get Tarasenko and Kane. Kane had some points and was fine, but expectations were super high for them, and it's a letdown. I'd be surprised if Gerard Gallant is the coach of that team tomorrow. I think that'll happen at some point fairly soon, if I had to guess, because they really felt like they had a chance to win the cup after going to the conference final, and they watched Alexis Lafreniere, number 1 overall draft pick. He 0 goals, 0 assists for the series. They had some disappointing performances from some guys. So the other thing to note is New Jersey's a new style, new NHL hockey team. They're fast, they're good, they're nasty, man. Like this Jersey team, when it has as good a chance as anyone to legitimately win the cup this year.
Yeah, I love everything about New Jersey. Obviously, they just brought in Luke Hughes. I don't know. Did he get any time in that?
I actually don't know. It was always on at the same time as the Leaf game, so I watched. Yeah. Last night was the first game I watched. Yeah.
High-end first-round pick, Jack Hughes, who's just a phenomenal player. Yeah. Elite top 5 in the league for sure. The goaltending, is it a skier? I don't even know.
Akira Schmid.
Akira Schmid. I butcher the name. Akira Schmid sounds like a Jedi. But he played out of his mind. Again, I look at it, if I'm a Rangers fan, how disappointed you have to be, not just because of the moves you made to put yourselves in this position and not getting past the first round, but how disappointing is it the fact that you mentioned Lafreniere, 1 point in the entire, you have no points in the entire
points. Yeah.
No points. Capo Caco, another very high round draft pick who's never really panned out to expectations. Those are 2 guys that you've put a lot of stock in, draft in terms of the draft, and they haven't panned out at all. Like, where do their futures lie with this team? Are they going to stick around? Or, how much longer are you going to keep? Is it coaching? I don't know.
Well, they've had this thing where they've been like, all right, well, these guys will play kind of the third line role until they're ready to be first line guys. Now you're X years into their careers, 4 or whatever it is. And it's like, I'm not sure you're going to get first line guys here. So, you either accept what they are or trade them, while they still have that prospect sheen on them, or they got real decisions to make in New York.
Yeah, 100%. And I don't know. I was never very high on Lafreniere coming out of that draft. I thought, you could have went Byfield or Lafreniere at first overall, and I think you would have been, you'd have been happy. But I don't think I would ever expected either of those guys just not meeting expectations this many years removed from their draft class. People were even saying Lafreniere was generational. I never thought he was a generational player.
No, certainly not.
Not a chance. The Avs dropped their opening round to the Seattle Kraken. Are you a crackhead? Are you all aboard, at least in the West, for what's going on in Seattle? And could they be the next Golden Knights? The West, I think it's pretty wide open. I think it's really anybody's opportunity to play for the cup.
Yeah, Colorado just too thin at the end. Nona Chushkin, which Colorado never even commented on.
Yeah,
it's a mess. No Landeskog. Kadri's gone after the year. They're a totally different team than the year before. Too many injuries, too thin, bad luck. So Seattle's fine everywhere. They don't have any real weak spots, and that was enough to get them through round 1. And now, a fairly gettable matchup in round 2 again. So, you never know. I'm not a big Kraken believer as much as I was the Golden Knights back in the day, but if the stars align, you never know.
The Golden Knights were just a wagon the entire season. Not that Seattle, it wasn't a good team this year, but I think if you look on paper, I think the Golden Knights roster, at least back then, was much more formidable. And I don't know. I hate the fact that the Golden Knights advanced past a playoff run. I hate the fact that Jack Eichel played well.
Yeah.
Again, like you said before we started recording, that makes for good hockey, good talk. So, but here in Buffalo, we want nothing, no part of it. So. But speaking of which, moving on, before we let you go, looking to next year for the Sabres, is the hype real, at least from an outsider looking in? The season that they had, obviously many fans might be a little bit critical of Kevin Adams not doing enough at the deadline, seeing as you finished 1 point out of a playoff spot.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't know if we would have beaten Boston, but I think we would have given them a good matchup. I think we would have given them some problems, especially that we believe we finally found our goaltender in Devin Levi.
Yeah.
How do you feel about the Sabres? Obviously being in the Ontario-Toronto market, being pretty close to, I don't know how much Sabres hockey you watched this year, but how do you feel about the team going into 2023?
Just while you're talking, I was pulling up this. I have the sport logic stats on like where, expected goals for and against per 60 and all that. And the Sabres already are in the tier of teams that scores at an elite level. And that's probably the hardest thing to do. They're not too far behind. They're kind of the dividing line between the Leafs, the Panthers, the Oilers, the Devils, and on the other side of them, it kind of, you get the worst teams. The Rangers, the Golden Knights, they score at a playoff level. Keeping the puck out of your net is a solvable problem to me. I think, the key for them is, patience is good, but at some point, I think the hardest thing to do is transition to saying, now we're trying to win the Stanley Cup, and they're there, right? That's where they are in their progression. And I would like to see them get aggressive. I would like to see them add meaningful pieces from the outside to this roster, whether it is on the D-core or even up front. As you mentioned, like Levi is your guy. He's going to be your guy. And, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen in there, he can, be a part of the team, I assume, as a backup. I don't know his situation as well.
A lot of people are skeptical about him.
Are they?
Here's the thing. I think on the blue line, I don't think we were tough enough remotely, clearly, especially in front of our own net. I think a lot of our positions, if you really wanted to take a deep dive into it, was it goaltending? Yes. Consistency? Yes. I mean, Craig Anderson himself, for his age, had a great year and finished it off in storybook fashion in the goat head jersey against his former team, Ottawa, at the end of the year. I was at that game. It was a great experience, and I was happy I was there to experience it. But I would say defensively is the bigger issue because there was a lot of puck watching happening below the dots in front of our own net. Kind of, not keeping it simple, picking up stick checking, just like very soft play below the dots on our own end all year long. Then Devin kind of showed up and they started to clean some of that stuff up, or Devin just made them look better because he was able to make those saves. But in terms of UPL, I've never been a UPL stan. Like I'm not a guy who's been, we have to have him. He's not the problem, but he's absolutely an NHL goaltender. Yeah. I think that I'm not saying you would have an Olmark Swayman situation here next year, but I think
you can back up on an entry level, then great.
Yeah, I think you treat it like that.
Yeah.
I think you treat it like that. I think you treat it like he's at one more year left on his deal. It's only a one-way contract. If you're telling me we're going into the next season with Devin Levi and UPL as our number one and number two, I'm fine with it. I know Comrie's still under a contract too, so I don't know how they figure that. They're going to figure that out, but
the other part, just looking at they gave up chances at a level with Chicago, Columbus, like the bad team. So, that is the issue to clean up. But again, that's much more solvable than having the talent. You have any team in the NHL might say, if you could start your D-core with Dahlin and Power, and then anything after that, they might say, we'll scrap our whole D-core and we'll take that option. So you love that you have those two guys. I'm going to write something about the toughest thing to do is to transition from we're a bad team tanking and trying to add prospects to a cup contender, because there has to be years in the middle where you're okay. And the Sabres did that. Last year, they were a playoff cusp team. You're not getting the high draft pick. You have to get there first. No one sucks and then wins the cup. So this is like their progression. They got to that sort of line for me last year. And then it gets harder. It's like in golf, when you're like a 30 handicap, it's not that hard to become a 20 with time, effort, lessons, whatever. You want to become a 10 from a 20, it's pretty hard.
Yep.
You want to become a 10 to a 0, it's a whole other thing. And so the Sabres we'll call them a 20, call them a 15, wherever you think they are. This is the tough part. Now you're in the class with the Leafs and with Tampa next year, probably with Boston next year.
Tough division.
It's a tough division. So how do you become 4% better? It hasn't mattered for the Sabres when they've been not very good if they got 4% better. it matters now. So now you find out if your GM is worth the salt when he makes the moves to make you better by increments.
I love that point about Adams, and you like you said, is he worth the salt? Because in terms of signing what he already has in house, he's done a great job. I think Tage Thompson could turn out to be the next Nathan McKinnon contract.
For sure. It's already one of the stupidest contracts in the league.
Yeah, he's $7.2 million in, if not for injury twice this year, he's a 50 goal scorer without a doubt. Like, he missed a little bit of time.
He's a $15 million player next year.
Yeah, 100%. Dahlin, we'll see where he comes in at this offseason. I know they're already starting conversations with Owen Power and his agent. But again, you got Dylan Cousins at 7.1. Yeah. I want to say Matisse Samuelson's at around $4 million or so. He's a top line pair defenseman for you. And he's a big reason why Dahlin is able to be so effective because, and that's not me taking anything away from Dolls. It's just, when you have a stay-at-home guy like him that, plays such an honest game in his own end, it gives you the opportunity for a guy like Dahlin to be very creative offensively, to be more dynamic, and to take more risks.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to see even more so with better goaltending next year. But I have guys like Kyle Okposo who are near the end of their career. He hasn't decided. They left the door open for him to come back at the captain of the team. Personally, if it's me, if you're bringing back Kyle Okposo, I'm hard pressed to keep the C on his jersey just because you handcuff yourself in a situation there where if he is not keeping up halfway into the season, how can you sit your captain?
Right.
As a healthy scratch.
100%.
And maybe you go the co-captain route like you did back in the day of Greer, and I don't know. But for me, if you're looking at a lineup that won't include Girgensons or Okposo next season, you guys have Yuri Kulik, who set records in the AHL this year as an 18-year-old for scoring. They have so much capital between Matthew Savoy, again, I say Yuri Kulik, Noah Ostlund, and Isaac Rosine, all former first-round picks. I think personally, you're so heavy at the forward position coming in next year that maybe you entertain just trading your first-round pick for help now in this draft, just because, outside of the defense, which I think that's where you're the most thin at. Offensively, I think you're fine. You mentioned you're already scoring at a playoff rate.
Yeah.
Maybe trade that first round pick for an established defenseman right now, because
you can start to do things like that now.
100% there. And it's for me as a Sabres fan who's, as diehard as I am, it's hard to believe we're finally there. We're finally there.
Yeah, you're there.
We're there. Or we can finally talk about trading first round picks for players and not stockpiling draft picks anymore. It's a nice feeling, but I do agree with you. I think this offseason is really where you can, for the first time, really judge Adams and if he's meant to be in this position.
Yeah, it'll be exciting to see what the Sabres do. I will say they're already one of my favorite teams to watch. As a fan, at least you guys have something that has been enjoyable this past season. They're a really fun team. I would like a couple of years before the Leafs start to really stink. I would like the Sabres to get really good, and I'd like to have a couple of good battles over the next 2 seasons, 3 seasons.
If if Toronto, obviously if they don't get past the second round, and things don't really change next year, do you see Austin Matthews leaving?
That's genuinely a tough to answer. I can't see it happening, but he's if they don't win and don't have success, you never know. So I'm not going to sit here and say it'll never happen. It's a possibility.
I'm just saying they're building a nice brand new arena back at home where he lives. Connor Bedard could end up being an Arizona Coyote. I'm a big conspiracy theory guy. I think the NHL wants Connor Bedard in Arizona because they've tried so hard for so long to get hockey to work there. I think that could be a lot of fun to watch with the talent they have there already. Maybe some Connor Bedard.
It would be humiliating for the NHL if the generational player of Connor Bedard plays 3 seasons in a college barn in front of 4,800 people.
I thought they're going to have that arena up and running, ready to go after next year.
No. They're
never mind then. No,
they're in mullet for 3 more years.
They are. Okay. I was mistaken. I thought I read that they were out. They were done after next season.
They should be. If they do that, then it's possible. But I just can't see how you can put, how's that for hockey related revenue that you got a must see guy? They sold out like an 18,000 rink building in Regina to watch this kid play. You got to put him somewhere people can watch him.
I remember when it was Tavares' draft year, and me and some friends drove up a couple times up north to go see him play one time after he was traded to the London Knights. Yeah. It was pretty cool. The guy was the real deal. But I mean, obviously he's had a great career, but Connor Bedard is just on a different level. And for sure. I'm excited to see where he ends up. But my mistake. I thought that Marino was going to be done after next season.
Still not approved by Tempe yet. They're working on it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyways, thanks for hopping on with me, Justin. Again, if you guys want to check out his book, Down and Back on Alcohol, Family, and Life in Hockey, you can get that at Penguin Random House Canada. Or hopefully anywhere else you can get your books up north.
Yeah, Barnes and Noble, it's there.
Barnes and Noble, yeah, exactly. So, is this your second book?
No, it's my first one, debut book.
Because I was reading for readers of 9 lessons I learned from my father in hockey confidential. It's just in the description. I thought maybe second book. Yeah. Okay, well, it's his first book. From the cliff notes I've read, it looks to be great. I was a big fan of A Matter of Inches by Clint Malarchuk, and then Rick Vive's book as well. So I'll promo in this.
Looks like that.
There you go. If I buy one, can I get one autographed by Justin?
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, actually funny. I'm sure you get this every once in a while, but I told my girlfriend on the phone before going, I was like, yeah, I'm going into work a little bit late, having Justin Bourne from Sportsnet on. He's like, wait, you're having Jason Bourne on? Like,
yeah,
it's like, I always do want to say Jason. But
listen, it's I was saying at the Sportsnet studios in wardrobe, it says Jason Bourne above my clothes, and I just let them. I don't bother changing.
Why? Yeah, why bother? Yeah, exactly.
I hear it so much anyway. It's all good.
Honestly, he's the biggest badass in history. I don't care what anybody
call me John Wick. I don't care.
As I say, it's him and John Wick. If you're one of those movie guys that wants to see a battle of two characters, I think them two are it.
That's got to be it for sure.
But thanks again, Justin, for hopping on with me. Hopefully it's not as long in between episodes this time around. We'll get you on maybe hopefully sooner. Maybe next season, beginning of next season, or maybe around the finals if you have time.
That'd be great, man. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Justin. This has been episode 123 of Two Goalies, One Mic, brought to you by Outlet Liquor, the place to buy a case on George Urban Boulevard for all your adult beverage needs on NHL game night. Go to Outlet Liquor. Tell them the guys from Two Goalies, One Mic sent you. Justin, you have a great day, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, man. Thanks a lot.